All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock now. Welcome to our biweekly virtual clinic, our virtual plant clinic. Um, my name is Daniel Cap. I'm not our usual host for our regulars here. I'm filling in for Sally today, as she's transitioning back from maternity leave. I know she was at our last webinar, but she wasn't able to make it today. So you have me. Um, so I'm going to go through just a little bit of housekeeping first. So for those people that have not been with us before, this is a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. So that means that while you can see us, we can't see or hear you. But you will be able to communicate with us if you have questions or comments. You can put questions in the Q&A tab, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And then we also have the chat open if you want to put in questions or if there's anything that you need me or David to know. And then I can, if there's any information I need to get to you by typing, then I can get it to you via the chat. I think that's about it for the housekeeping. We're going to go for about an hour today. David's got about 45 minutes of presentation, and then we'll take about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So feel free, as soon as you think of a question, type it in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. If we're not able to get through all of them, which sometimes that happens because there's just so many questions, you can also email us through our contact form on our website. And I'm actually the one that gets all those questions, and I'll make sure that David gets them. Introductions, we have David Yost, one of our top clinicians here at Merrifield Garden Center for, gosh, over 25 years now, David.
30 years as for this month.
Oh, wow, 30 years. Yep.
Yeah.
And he just had a birthday the other day, too. Yeah, so David is a fountain of knowledge, one of the smartest plant people you'll ever get to know. So without that, I'm going to toss it over to you, David.
Well, thank you and good afternoon, everybody. I hope I can live up to that introduction because I don't know about all those claims that Danny made for me. He made those, not me. But again, thanks so much for being here this afternoon. This is just a phenomenal time in the garden. The weather's pleasant. We can get outside. Thank goodness we got some rain the last couple of days. We still need more, but that is certainly a nice reprieve from the dry conditions we've been having. So it's a fantastic time for planting. And I just put that as like all encompassing. You can be planting trees, shrubs, lawns, bulbs, flowers, annuals, perennials. It's just one of those transitional times as we move into the fall and into the winter. It's just great time to be out there, like I said, enjoying the beauty of the season and adding it to your landscape. So today I'm kind of focusing on some flowers that we can bring in that are going to give us a little bit of this color and interest in late summer. But like I said, we'll be taking a couple breaks in here. I like to make this more conversational, interactive. So anytime a question pops into your head or just comments or ideas that you want to share, please put those in the comments box. That will get to Danny. And we like, again, to make this as interactive as we possibly can. So today, like I said, it's kind of a mixed bag. I got a little bit of botany for you, some colorful flowers. And before we get really into that, I'm going to start out with what I thought was a kind of an interesting question that I got in my email box last week. So we'll start here and see what you think. I'm going to give you just a second here to look at this yourself. So we're looking at is some customers that obviously been out of town. Everything was looking good at the time they left. They came back and then they're finding some of their shrubs all beat up like this. It's a mystery because it's really just these couple of plants. As they look around their yard, I think there was another cherry tree that looked damaged, but they couldn't figure out what's going on. So their question is, they know it's been dry, but would that cause this kind of damage to happen? And if you look at this on this cherry tree, or it's a peach tree, I'm sorry about peach tree, you see all this abrasion up and down on the trunk of the tree. There's also a broken branch lying on the ground. We look over on this juniper and you might be able to see branches here that are ripped and torn off. And they're thinking like, what happened? Everything looked fine when I got home. Well, you probably have seen this or recognize it, and this is deer rubbing. This is what happens at this time of the year. The males go out and they start marking their territory. So they have scent glands and they're rubbing small trees, and some of them, a pair of them are located right behind their antlers. So they will go out and they start rubbing trees and things to kind of mark their territory as they go into the mating season. And in the process, they're injuring the landscape plants, causing this kind of ripping, tearing, shedding of branches. Uh, the reason I'm putting this in is because this is the earliest I ever remember this happening. I did a couple quick searches on Google looking at Virginia Department of Conservation resources, and they will say that this does often start as early as mid-September. But again, I got this picture a good week ago. So I'm just saying, hey, while we're at the very beginning, I want to put this out so that if you have small trees, if you have any kind of history of deer in your property, you might be able to be proactive and take steps to go out this and prevent this from happening. So the deer, I've noticed, they do tend to play favorites. I couldn't tell you exactly what they're after, but like if you look at that peach tree, they love trees that are right about that caliber, about that 1 or 2 inch caliber. If the tree starts to get much larger than that, I think it's kind of like this Goldilocks thing where they go out and say, oh, this tree's too big, this one's too small. But where they're in this kind of size range, that kind of 1 to 2, maybe even up to 3 inch tree, that seems to be like feel just perfect for them. And that's what they tend to go after. So what you would do is there's nothing that we can do at this point in time. The damage is already done. But what I can recommend to you is taking preventative action. And that preventative action, what I'm really talking about is putting some type of barrier around the plant. So that would include, just as examples, if you've recently planted or have young trees that are vulnerable, this is just a plastic, almost it's like wire, except it's plastic. It's just a tree protector that you can slip around the tree, essentially tie it shut with twist ties or zip ties, and it provides this protective layer between the deer and the trees. So especially if you've done new landscaping and you might have a tree that you spent $300, $500 on, it's worth putting a little bit of a protective measure around that. Another example would be, this is also one that's traditionally worked. There are a series, there's actually I think about 3 wraps inside this. This is, again, it's just a plastic wrap that we can put on tree branches to help protect them from that rubbing injury. Now, it's a little bit unusual seeing that juniper, that multi-stem plant, and they tend to less often or less frequently, they go after the evergreens, but they, in this case, went after that juniper. And I know what Peggy has told me, she's had really good success. I assume everybody knows Peggy. We've been working together all these years and doing these classes together. But she has deer in her garden and she's had very good success. We sell some large tomato cages that we've custom made at Merrifield. So they're 2 pieces and you can snap those together and use that as a protective barrier around trees in the wintertime. And of course, you can use that to support and grow tomatoes in the summer. I didn't bring that with me because it's kind of large and unmanageable to use here in the studio. But bottom line here is that the deer rut has started. It started a little bit early. They will go rubbing on trees and branches. It will start now in September. And it usually hits sort of like peak activity in November, but it will carry on oftentimes into January. So if I put these protectors around your trees, I would just plan on leaving them in place pretty much throughout the winter. And then maybe late February, March would be a good time to remove them. So that's just a little alert and warning to go out there, and a good sort of plant clinic topic there to kick things off. So flowers. I want to talk about late blooming flowers, late summer blooming flowers, but in particular, I'm going to be focusing on the aster family today. The aster family is either the largest or second largest family of plants there is in the whole plant kingdom. We estimate 32,000 different species of asters. Most people would agree that there's more orchids, but because we're still discovering plants, there are some people that want to argue and say, well, we just don't know, maybe we don't know the whole scope of this thing. But the bottom line is there are a lot of different asters, like I said, 32,000 that we recognize. The way you can recognize an aster is that it has what's called a composite flower form. In fact, at one time, Compositae was the name of the family. Because what we're looking at in this image, each one of these little orange spikes is an individual flower. So the structure of the flower on this is that you have what are called disc flowers, all arranged together in a head. And then this outer range of flowers that you see here are referred to as ray flowers. So it's really the anatomy on these things, I think, is so cool because the ray flower that's out here was a flower that had 5 petals at one time in its evolution, but those petals have fused together. So that petal represents an individual flower. This petal represents an individual flower, and so on. And you can see here the anthers on there where they're opening up and pollen's being released through here. So this basically is how we would recognize an aster because of this composite flower formulation. Again, so many plants. And this could be anything like lettuce. You don't think of lettuce, but when you see it bloom, you'll recognize the aster flower that's in there. The classic form is this daisy, and we're going to look at several different variations on the theme. One of the reasons that this group of plants has been so successful is that this flower arrangement is very, very attractive to pollinators. So I have this little skipper butterfly, and if you're out searching for pollen and nectar, what they're doing now is they can just park themselves there. They don't have to expend energy flying around, and he or she's going through there and basically probing individual flowers, seeing if there's any nectar in there. So this becomes very efficient and attractive to pollinators, and that can include, bees, flies, butterflies, wasps, a whole range of diverse insects that will come to these flowers. This is what's called a hoverfly. It's mimicking a wasp or a bee, so you might look at that and say that's a bee, but in actuality, this is a small fly. And one of the things I love about having asters in the garden, when you look at, you do get a bunch of little small native bees, small wasps, butterflies. These hoverflies are amazing predators. They can't bite or sting. They just try to scare you off by the looks. But what will happen is, as an adult, they are feeding on the pollen. Pollen's very rich in protein, so it's a good source for the insect food. But as an immature, after they lay eggs, their larvae become very effective predators, feeding primarily on aphids, but could also either be like small, immature scale and that type of thing. So all these insects play extremely valuable roles in our ecosystem and maintaining a balance in there. They're helping the plants reproduce by spreading the pollen so that they can get fertilized and produce seeds. They're helping keep other insects in balance by being predators or parasites. And they themselves become a food source for many other forms of wildlife. So again, these asters are just really a fun group of plants, but if you delve too deep into it, trying to identify and classify them into all different genus and stuff can get to be a little bit overwhelming because there are so many of them. Many of these are blooming right now in late summer. They will bloom at all different times of the year, and they include annuals and perennials of all different types. But late summer is a lot of times when they sort of, as I say, take this center stage that's on there. Now, another thing that I think leads so much to their success in the landscape is they're also, you will recognize them by the way they produce seeds. Think of dandelions, right? Everybody knows dandelions that form those little heads of seeds in late spring, and then the wind comes and disperses them, and they have this where they can literally float and move on the wind. So it's not only their ability to attract pollinators, adapt to different environments, different bloom times, and all the wonderful things they offer there, but it's also then they're successful in dispersing their seeds, because if you're a plant and you produce seeds, but they all fall down to the ground at the base of the plant. That doesn't work so well. Their success also means that a lot of what we define as weeds in the landscape also fall within this family. So you look at a plant like the common thistle here. Thistle, it's a beautiful flower. It's attractive to pollinators, but it's also an introduced plant that came to this country from Europe. Because the seeds do form these little like parachutes and they can disperse quite widely, they'll pop up everywhere. And that means mostly in an agricultural environment, they can become very weedy. In a home landscape, they become weedy because the thistle is also a perennial. And what it does is once it gets rooted in there and matures, it starts spreading by roots, right? So it has this underground stem, this rhizome, where a thistle plant grows, then it sends a little root out, and another one pops up, and another one roots out and pops up. So once they get established, they keep spreading very aggressively and become a major headache. So this is not a plant that would necessarily be in commercial production or sale for those very reasons. Even though it is beautiful and it is serving an ecological value, it's also considered basically an invasive plant because it keeps spreading, and then it's also causing some economic harm by in agriculture, and also ecological harm because it spreads so much. Right next to it, I put a picture of burnweed. You see a lot of the same characteristics. This plant really has no, the flower, this is what the flower looks like. You might see just a tiny, oh, here we go. This one up there might be in bloom, but you can barely see. There's like little or no ornamental value on there. But what happens with burnweed, its ecological role, it gets that name, burnweed, sometimes called fireweed, because it thrives in disturbed areas, and particularly after there's been a fire. So this is a native plant. It's common throughout most of the US and North America, definitely here on the eastern coast. And what it will do a lot of times, if there is disturbance or fire in the forest, this is one of the first plants to grow. It's an annual, so a seed blows in there, waits. Once you have that disturbance, it's one of the first things to pop up. It helps to stabilize the soil, kind of occupies the ground. And so it's just its speed and the proliferation of it and the production of seed that makes it grow so crazily. So this might be considered a weed by many of us, but it's also a native plant. So it naturally grows here. So it's not really causing any harm to the environment or to the ecology or economic or any health risks. So it's not really considered an invasive plant. It's just considered kind of a nuisance and a weed. So that's kind of neat, just looking at this family of plants. Now they can go from being a garden hero to being kind of a garden nuisance. All these things really depend on what your view is and how you want to view it and your perspective on it. So continuing kind of on that school of thought, I think the goldenrod or solidago is probably the poster child for this kind of conversation. I would say for most of my gardening career in life, goldenrod would be considered a weed. It was really considered just a nuisance, something that we would work towards eradicating. And it developed this kind of bad reputation in large part because it had been accused of leading to hay fever. But that's really not the case. What ends up happening is hay fever is actually caused by another plant, also in the aster family, but it's caused by a plant called ragweed. I forgot to put a picture here. Ragweed, it has this, again, bland little unattractive kind of flower, but it's wind pollinated. So they will open up at the same time. The pollen disperses now, this same time of year is when the solidago is flowering. And then people just incorrectly assumed that it was pollen from the solidago that was annoying them. Well, what's happened, of course, is more and more people are starting to take a broader view of our gardens and looking at their ecological value. It's not just a matter of what's pretty for me, but what's also going to help support a healthy, functional ecosystem. And as we look at that now, the lowly little goldenrod has kind of been reclassified or reconsidered and recognized as a keystone species. So in ecology, when we talk about keystone species, that's a plant that, or a species, not even a plant. It really mostly applies to wildlife, but it would be a species that really plays a critical role in maintaining and developing the structure of an ecosystem or supporting an abundance of other diverse life. So what happens is this plant, the goldenrod, fits into that category because these little small flowers, like we talked about in the aster family, this is actually a collection of several little flowers and these individual blooms. These nectaries, because they're small and they're easy to access, this means bees, butterflies, all kinds of beetles, wasps, all kinds of insects have access to it. So it's easy access, an abundant source of pollen and nectar, which in turn then supports a much healthier ecosystem. So if we're trying to establish a more ecologically balanced landscape that supports more diverse biology and biodiversity, this actually turns out to be one of the key species that we want to include in your garden. So this one that you're looking at is a variety called Fireworks. It's in bloom now. I think you can see how it gets its name when it's in bloom. I just love this plant. The kind of open look at it, I look at that and when I saw a flower, I instantly thought, yeah, fireworks. It looks just like that coming out of here. Now, within when you start talking about goldenrod and the solidagos, you really want to do some homework before adding these to your garden. First thing I discovered with fireworks, because this is, I don't practice what I preach. I just talk about more doing. I just decided to stick it in. I had no idea how large this plant was going to get. So this was last year in my garden. Over the winter time, I moved it further back into the border where it would have more room to grow and serve as a background plant. So I've learned this plant can pretty quickly get to about 3 foot tall, 3 foot wide span. So it doesn't fit every garden, though I've managed to work it in even into a small garden space. Some goldenrod species will spread. Some of them have this underground rhizome, like we talked about, and they will spread. And so they don't always lend themselves to garden spaces because you plant them in one place and they start coming up everywhere. They will also get mildew towards late summer in the season. So that can be a little bit of a distraction. So again, it may not always lend itself to a more formal setting or formal garden, but in a naturalized garden, ecological type garden, they could be fantastic. This is just a different variety, or a different species altogether. And you can see how it's much more upright in this form, more compact. And this is one that's called just Solar Cascade. So there's many species of these. Some of them have been developed for growing in smaller spaces, more compact. Some of them will misbehave and start spreading. So just do a little homework before you decide to add that in there. But if you want to bring pollinators into the garden, take advantage of ecological value, and some of them I do think are just drop dead gorgeous for this time of the year. Other plants that might kind of fit into this group a little bit is I wanted to bring your attention to Joe Pye weed, this one back here. So Joe Pye is a very tall native plant. It will also often grow in kind of an edge of woods habitat. It seems to really thrive in moist environments. This particular image is a rain garden. And when they're just growing naturally out in the field, I saw some that, I think because of the rain we had early this year, that were growing 7 and 8 feet tall. So it's a beautiful plant, wonderful for attracting butterflies. I mean, I think this will bring butterflies in the late season. I mean, I'll tell you myself, I plant for butterflies and insects. It's disappointing. I'm going all season, haven't seen a single monarch butterfly, but when the Joe Pye bloomed, that's when the monarchs started to show up. And so it will never let you down. What happens is because they can get quite large, there are some varieties that have been developed to stay a little smaller and more compact. this picture just doesn't show as well what I do. Because again, I have a limited amount of garden space. I prune them back. So a lot of tall perennials, like the Joe Pye, if you go out in about June, this is a patch that I have. I pruned this back to a height of about 3 feet, maybe 2.5 feet tall. Let's say 30 inches tall. In June, I pruned it back. It reblooms. It's just finished flowering. It was in full bloom about 2 weeks ago, I guess, when I probably took this picture, and it's just a few inches taller than my air conditioning unit. So I'm going to say it grew back to a height of about maybe 36 inches, and it's just a profusion of flowers and peak bloom at that point. So these plants, we can work with them. We can make them work, and we can pick the right varieties and fit them even into more formal landscapes if that's what we want to do. Again, I thought this was a really nice composition, and showing up in a rain garden. So these are top-notch native plants, sturdy, reliable, just going to reward you and reward pollinators and help keep a healthy garden functioning all the time. One other, I'm kind of bouncing around here, what I show before I go back to my pictures, is at the last minute. Oh, here we go. I brought this blue mist flower in. This blue mist flower is in the same genus as the Joe Pye weed. They're very close relatives. But I wanted to show it to you because, again, they grow in that kind of moist environment. And in a meadow type planting, they stay pretty well contained. They'll just congregate together in that kind of moist area. And what they'll do is they do spread by rhizomes. So this plant, in addition to prolific seed, it will send an underground stem and start popping up. So sometimes it's not really well behaved in a more formal garden. So I offer this one with caution. The colors are just so distinctive and so unique. And the way that blue can work with some of the golden colors of the goldenrod that's out there, it can be a really neat plant to have for the right location. It's in there. But again, I offer this as a plant maybe for, again, these naturalized spaces or areas where you don't really care if it spreads, because that's why you don't see it planted very often, because it just doesn't stay where you planted it. It will move around. But with that caution in mind, it's a great plant ecologically. It's a beautiful color to work with. It is Virginia native and in the same genus there as the Joe Pye. So this today, again, is my kind of shout out to the asters, Asteraceae. And another one that's here. And then I'll say after this, I'm going to take a little stop for any questions that you might have and show some more plants. So if you have anything that might be thinking about, make sure you put that in the chat box. And Danny will be following up in just a second. So chrysanthemums, right? So when you think about fall, when you think about this type of year, right, you must start thinking about chrysanthemums. And there's so many different types, so many different species, so many different colors that are out there. These are perennial chrysanthemums. These are rock solid, hardy, it's almost close to what I would call indestructible. But if we work at it, we can kill almost anything. But this gives you an idea of what they will look like. This is a variety called Sheffield Pink. This clump, actually, it almost wants to double in size each year. So each year I go in and dig parts of it out to maintain or limit the spread. So this, again, is one that I offer with some cautions, where either you plant it in a big space where you can allow it to spread, or like me, it becomes a maintenance thing where you will need to take responsibility and sort of just on an annual basis, like say, I go in, I cut out some of the plants around it, uproot it, and maintain it within the limited planting area that I have. These are not blooming yet. They will start flowering probably in October and may even go into November time period. So these are late in the season when a lot of other color might be winding down, and you can still get an amazing array of different colors and flowers that's in there. Again, that same classic daisy shape with the head flowers, the ray flowers. And again, I caught this picture because again, it showed these are more of the hover flies looking like a bee, but this is actually a fly anatomically. And you can see them in there probing those individual flowers for the pollen and the nectar. So again, just re-emphasizing the ecological value of having asters in your garden. So let me see if we got any comments or questions right now, and if not, then I can go on.
We do have a few questions. First question is can goldenrod be planted now?
Can goldenrod be planted now? Absolutely. This is a fantastic planting season for anything. Why I like to plant perennials right now is the soil's still warm. We still have what, at least another 4 to 6 weeks ahead of growing season. So this gives our perennials a little bit of an opportunity. It gives them some time to get rooted in before winter comes. And the others, these plants, these are almost everything I've shown here. These are native winter hardy plants. So the cold doesn't even bother them. What can be a problem is if things get dry. Sometimes, like we had very dry conditions in August, even after the rain, it's still dry, and sometimes they dry out in the wintertime. So cold is not a problem. I just feel like anytime you put new plants in, you have to be attentive to the watering.
Wonderful. The next question is, and it was, I think the second to last slide you had with the Joe Pye weed. They're wondering what the alliums in front of the Joe Pye weed were.
That's an amazing little plant it's called Millennium. So it's Allium Millennium. That's not sold as a bulb. It is sold in our perennial section. And again, I think I probably planted them around this time of year. I mean, it was late in the season when I planted them. Shouldn't say too much, or grab them out of the sales section. I know a lot of us searching there, but I found a good deal of that. Stuck them in the ground late in the season, and they have come back and just been as strong as ever. They do best in a sunny environment. I try to grow them where I don't have quite enough sun, so they just kind of limp along. I don't get quite as powerful flowering as you would in the sun.
Wonderful. Next question is, are spring stokesia, Stokes aster, and fall asters related?
They are in the same family. So when I say family, keep in mind we classify plants, we group them together. So broadly speaking, yes, but they are individual and separate and different species, and even a different genus that's in there. So related, but not like brother and sister related, but a little bit more like a cousins to each other. We can kind of think of it that way. I did want to say real quickly that questions, and we'll go on more questions, but leads me into a little bit of a thing with asters and chrysanthemums. So we can talk about just a minute. There are perennials, and there are some that are more considered annuals. So I wanted to bring out a true aster of asters, which have all the same advantages. So this plant right here, this is a, I think this is basically a woodland aster, native aster. What you'll see is the late blooms. I just have one little flower beginning to form on here, but they get very open in their growth. So they get this kind of open, lanky growth that's in there. And they are somewhat sepal mildew. So they are oftentimes, they don't fit every garden, but if you put them into a naturalized landscape where you can get along with that open form, and a lot of times they get quite large, I'll use the word floppy, that's what I was looking for. They are wonderful, wonderful plants, beautiful flowers, great pollinators, all these great things. But again, in a more naturalized type of garden. This would be another example of our native perennial aster flowering now, but it's a variety that's been selected to try to stay a little more compact. You can also do a little bit of that by pruning and shearing. But I thought we've been talking about the aster. I had to show an aster, and since we had that question, I'm taking advantage of it. Now we'll go back to your questions.
All right, we got one more question currently. This one is just a little bit longer. So last year, one of my soft touch hollies died of black rot. How long do I have to wait before replacing the shrub in the same spot? If I try another soft touch holly, what treatment should I apply to prevent black rot in the future around the new shrub?
Yeah, so black rot, Japanese hollies in particular are susceptible to it. It also it goes after some annuals, like we'll see that in pansies. So you might one suggestion would be if you just want to sidestep that issue of avoid, I know for two, you may just want to avoid putting another Japanese holly in there. But for example, if you selected a boxwood that would look very similar, we really don't have problems with black rot in the boxwood, whereas we do in the Japanese hollies. If you want to put another Japanese holly back into that spot, because of your design, you need to maintain symmetry or something like that. We do sell a fungicide for it. It's a granular product under the name of Infuse, INFUSE, but you have to recognize you're not really treating the soil, you're treating the plant with it. So the disease is still there, but you can treat the plant with that as a preventative treatment. I would also make sure you do a very good job of soil preparation so that you have good drainage and aeration in there. Again, to me, the easiest thing is trying to just dodge the bullet, maybe plant something different in there.
All right, that is all the questions we currently have.
Good, because I wanted a little time to talk about some of these other plants around me. As I was saying, this is also a time of year that we want to go out and basically decorate and get all the colors of fall going for good reason that's out there. So in addition to all the flowers and stuff that I'm showing, is we also have chrysanthemums and asters that are annuals. So if I look at this aster that's in here, well, maybe you can see it better from here. I won't even try to move my display. But this one right here, this is also an aster, but these were not really developed for their cold hardiness. These are varieties that were developed for prolific blooms, really, striking color, more compact growth. If you were to plant this in your garden, it may or may not survive the winter, just depending on the severity of the winter. So a lot of these plants we breed for color and show, but in the process, their winter hardiness goes for that. So we just want to make really clear, like, hey, if I'm decorating for fall, we put those asters, chrysanthemums, and annuals house. If you want to put these flowers in your garden, you'll find them in the perennials section. And sometimes you may get lucky and actually have one of these annual ones over winter. So a couple here that I put together, this would be an example. This chrysanthemum, or what we might refer to as a pot mom. But this one, I said, is in the annuals house. When it's done flowering, you can plant it in your garden, but you have maybe a 50-50 chance of success. I have some people that plant them, turns out to be hardy and lives there for years. But they're really not sold for their hardiness. They're sold really for the flower color. And they come in so many different colors. I just seem to be kind of into the pinks and purples up here today. But we also, everybody thinks about these as all the colors of fall. So with these chrysanthemums, again, another member of the aster family, you can get everything, yellow, bronze, orange, just phenomenal colors to play with. And they will give you pretty rock solid. Like this plant has open flowers and it still has tight buds in here. You probably have about 4 weeks of good color, at least going on in here. Just make sure as always, kind of keep them watered that's in there. Couple, well, I have one other that or two others I'll just show off real quick from the aster family, and then we'll move on, just because I brought them in to show. So this is also a perennial. This is Heliopsis. These tend to get very tall. That's why I don't bring them into the set very much. This just happens to be a compact variety. But sunflowers, the Heliopsis, like you see here, these are all in the same family. They all offer the same wonderful benefits. And somewhere I thought I even had Black-eyed Susan, but it's probably out here. So those are all incredible. Other plants that you may want to put in this time of year also are going to be pansies. Now we've totally left that behind, that aster family behind. We're in the Violaceae family. Pansies, I've always thought, are one of your best values in the garden because you can plant them now. They are winter hardy. These are what are considered to be cool weather or cold weather annuals. So it's the hot weather that causes them to wither. If you put these out in your landscape, plant them, take care of them, they will continue. They'll live through the winter. They'll when temperatures are cold, they kind of mush down flat, but then when it's warm, they pop back up when it's above 50 degrees. So they give you flowering throughout the winter. All the way into spring, it's when we get to the real hot weather, we start hitting, 85, 90, 95 degrees. That's when they start to wither and fall out. Just little ads again, bulbs are in stock. We want to plant them now. Our bulbs, we plant them now for spring blooms because, for example, tulips need at least 12 weeks of chilling time. That means they need to go into the ground. They need to have a cool, moist environment. That needs to continue for at least 12 weeks. And then that triggers it to pop up and bloom next spring. So we'll get them in the ground. You can do this anytime between now and Christmas. And that's all just getting set up for next spring. Yeah, a lot of these plants, because they're just seasonal, I fit them much more decorating, just spots of color you can put in your porch, your patio, and like I said, put them in your garden. But it's just really nice to see that change of season that goes with it, and of course all the pumpkins and gourds that go with it. So, any questions now, or if not, I'm going to move on.
We currently do not have any questions, so you can.
Okay, we're making good time here. Let me go back to my pictures. Let's skip them. So this is what I wanted to put you out there again. I say, really, this is my favorite time of year. I love the fall. I love going into October, November when we start to see the colors of fall really pop up. But we're fully stocked now. Chrysanthemums are at peak bloom. The pumpkins, the gourds. You can do so many neat things. You can see where some of the sedge grasses, straw bales. So enjoy the season. Add these to your front porch. I've seen people create beautiful little vignettes in their gardens. So much you can do with these. As you know, I'm more into the science of it, a little bit less into the decorating side of it, but I truly enjoy it when other people put these nice displays together for me to enjoy. So go out there and do it. One more group of plants I want to show, and then we'll kind of wrap things up for today. Thinking about the season ahead and maybe wanting to add some color to your garden. I love camellias. I love all camellias. Every camellia is out there, really wonderful. But there are basically two groups that we work with. There are spring bloomers, and when I say spring, they can bloom maybe as early as February, but March and April kind of time period. And there are fall bloomers that will really start blooming in October, go through peak flowering in November, and will continue into December based a little bit on what the weather does and how soon it gets cold. So looking at some of these fall blooming camellias, a lot of this hybridization started at National Arboretum many decades ago when we had a really severe winter that basically killed, all but one or two camellias that were left in the garden. So one of the plant breeders out there recognized that as an opportunity to select for cold hardiness, because camellias historically would not do that well in our climate. We would grow camellias up here in Northern Virginia, but there was always that risk of getting winter kill on them during really severe winters. But over the last few decades, plant breeding and selection has developed a lot of camellias that are really solid in terms of their cold hardiness and winter hardiness. And a lot of these flower for us in this October, November, December time period. So this is one of those original hybrids out in National Arboretum. Variety is called Snow Flurry. Obviously, you can see the white peony type blooms on there. What they'll do is you can see these petals all over the ground. The Camellia sasanqua, their flowers are smaller. So the individual blooms are a little bit smaller in size, but they're extremely prolific. So if you look at this plant, which is here on our Fair Oaks nursery property, this one, if I just look at it and say, what, maybe it has 200 flowers on there. Those flowers open up, those petals drop off, and then 200 more buds open. Those flowers open, those petals drop off, then 200 more open. So what ends up happening is you have a long bloom season because it's a sequence of flowering. They don't all open and then drop at the same time. So you get this nice sequence of flowering on there. They're beautiful plants. They're very cold hardy. We've been planting them for decades. I mean, this plant here is probably close to 30 years old itself, to give you an idea of the size that they can get given enough time and their durability. That's the peony type flower that I was talking about, because they classify them by different flower forms. These are a couple more in there. I personally always like the simple flowers, so I tend to gravitate towards this kind of thing, the single row of petals that's blooming. Again, that's National Arboretum environment. Sasanqua, this is just a cold hardy, we'll call it sometimes its own 6 Sasanqua. Again, I like this just pink flowers that's on there. So these are all options for you to consider in terms of looking for color in the landscape. Just another Sasanqua, just because again, showing that. And again, you get one of these days in the wintertime or late in the season when it's 50 degrees, everything else is kind of done flowering. It could be November, but it's sunny and it's warm. The bees might be out scavenging around looking for a bite to eat, and it's nice to have something offer them. So while they're certainly not native, these are Asian plants, but they still can offer some ecological value as well. So that's kind of what I have for today. Do we have any questions out there?
We currently have one more question right now. This person, she was talking about the mounding mums that are annuals, but she has a daughter in Michigan that those mums have been coming back, and she was wondering, does the cold weather in Michigan, snow-covered ground, actually help these mums come back?
Snow is good. Snow actually acts as an insulator. It's like a blanket. So when you think about snow, it starts to accumulate at the temperatures of 32 degrees. It holds that temperature pretty consistently. Without it, just this past year in January, we went down as low as 7 and 8 degrees at times. So snow is a good thing of protecting plants, and it also, as it melts, it slowly waters them. So that could certainly contribute to it. It's probably just the way they were bred, because even the pot mums, the mounded mums that we sell, we just don't know which ones are going to be successful and which ones are not. They were never tested for that, evaluated. They're really just developed for pretty flowers. So we just sell them as annuals, but I have people that planted them and then had them come back for 10 years here in our climate as well. So I always tell people, everybody, that I think gardening is a big experiment. That's what it is for me. I just am always experimenting. Hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So you can put them out there and they might stay over for you. Other thing I'll mention on this, because you brought it up a little bit, this nice mounding habit, we get that with pruning, because again, they would grow much larger and then they get kind of more open in their growth habits. So what commercially is done, these will go in and get pruned at least once, and sometimes even twice, to keep them thick and bushy and full like that. So just if you took this and stuck it in your garden, chrysanthemums often would start flowering for you in July, but it's by controlling their growth, by pruning them, that the growers get this profusion of flowers and get the density that's in there. And I do that like the chrysanthemums in my garden, even some of those perennials, just to manage their size as well. So again, that's just a little thing that you can play around with.
Gotcha. Well, that is all the questions we have right now. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we close? And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to pop them in.
Yeah. Mostly, I just want to encourage you to get out and enjoy this time of year in the gardening season. You can plant everything. Our last show, we were talking about planting grass. You can still do that. Again, bulbs just came in, all this fall colors in there. trees and shrubs, which I'm sure we'll be talking in the upcoming shows. It's excellent. These plants live outside. Cold is not an issue. What happens to us though is sometimes we neglect the water. And I know I say this over and over, but I keep seeing dead plants over and over. So that's the way this game plays out. Uh, Even as you go into winter, we expect rain, sleet, snow, all that kind of thing, but it's not something we can rely on. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and in those cases, we need to be able to keep things moist. But it's an excellent planting season. Everything is out there looking great, and it's a nice time to be outside. So just encourage you to come visit me, visit our stores, and spend some time out there enjoying yourself. And with that, I'll be back in a couple of weeks.
That sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you want to revisit any part of this webinar, I am going to have it up on our YouTube channel probably later this afternoon or this evening. So that's just our Merrifield Garden Center YouTube channel that you can just search for. That has most of our past webinars through the past year, since we've been doing this for the past 5 or so years now. David's next virtual plant clinic is going to be on October 2nd, and the topic is still to be determined, and we're all really excited about that. Please take a look at our events page on our website if you guys are interested to see what other fun things we have coming up, including other webinars or live seminars. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.